All right, we are live for SEO Collective, October. Hi, how you doing? Hi, so really great to see all your faces here. We see some new faces here, we see some old faces, and one person described himself as a boomerang, so was here 4 years ago, come back. It's so great to see your face here again.
Never leave.
You never leave. once an SEO Collective, always an SEO Collective.
Once you go SEO, now you know.
Yeah, I don't even know if we've got like a collective word for ourselves yet, but we'll run with it. So it's so great to see everyone here. Of course, I'm just going to start off right off the bat and just say, thank you so much for coming. This one's a little bit different from our usual formula because we usually have like keynotes and things like that, but we decided that we would like to go back and explore some fundamentals, crawlability, rendering, indexability. We wanted to add ranking, conversions as well to it, but to be really honest, it was just so much to cover that we just stuck to crawlability, rendering, and indexability. So I'm really sorry if you're like really, really excited to talk about some ranking or excited to talk about some conversions. We might have to push that off to a different meetup, but that's all good. So we'll just get straight into it. Before I start go any further, I'd just like to appreciate that we're on stolen land. This is a land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Sovereignty was never ceded, and we want to pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So thank you very much. Really quick housekeeping. Of course, we're in the lovely Easy-Go gaming space. Doors do shut at 7, so just if you're listening to this.
Yeah, so like someone texts me, it's like, hey, I might not be in at 7, so they're gonna text me, it's like, let me in. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
I'm just gonna say from now on, it's just too hard for us to stop things and to go out and to open up doors and whatnot. So if you don't get here before 7, sorry guys. We would like to be a little bit more friendly about that, but at the moment we kind of can't. So if you are here, it's awesome to have you here. If you've missed out, really, really sorry. This will be on YouTube. Otherwise,
Nikki is volunteering for door duty. You're going to say that.
Oh, awesome.
And I'm
Nikki, not me.
sorry, I can't hear this person on the left hand side at all. Sorry.
You volunteer as tributes. Thank you.
We have some wonderful sponsors, of course. Before I mention the aforementioned sponsors up on the stage here, I would also just really like to give a big shout out to Nick Montague, who's just quietly sitting in the corner over there from Alpha Whale. Yeah, give him a round of applause. He brought beers. So we have so much beer, and we have so much alcohol, thanks to him. So just wanted to say thank you very much for that.
It's to celebrate your recent engagement, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, news. Breaking news. Should it be?
Yes. Somebody has put up with me to do that. So thank you very much. But it's wonderful to have it here and to share it with everyone. We'll get straight into the next part. I'm shy, damn it. Thank you so much to Peter Mead of SEO Workshop, who is an official sponsor and also the co-director of SEO Collective. Woo-hoo! Yes. And of course, to Easy-Go Gaming for sponsoring the venue.
And we're also hiring. I don't know if the job ad went out yet or not, but we're hiring an SEO coordinator here. So you get to work with me. So yeah, you get to do some fun stuff. If you want to do crypto gambling, Sandy and Cloudflare and SpellKit and cutting edge stuff, yeah, this would be for you.
And all kinds of cloning and exclusions
Don't worry
and inclusions of
about
IP.
Don't worry about that. We've already done that.
Oh, that's the fun stuff. It'd be really, really cool.
I can make it harder for them just to make it fun.
Edge case SEO, love that. For one of the most interesting, divisive moving spaces.
We got banned on Twitch.
There you go. Moving swiftly on. Just one more reminder also for SEO Workshop as well. They will be available. It does say small businesses, but Peter has worked with some of the largest companies, not just here in Australia, but in the world as well, also in the crypto space. So again, if you would like to, your organization have like really great one-on-one workshops to go through some things quite hyper-specific or more generalized for you and the rest of your team, Peter is offering workshops. Woo.
Thank you.
Okay, usually I say like get your phones out, take some photos of this. This is also available at the door as well. But if you do need to go to the bathroom, there's actually codes for them. So for women's, it's on this level, the second level, and that's the code. You just go outside, you use that, you come back in, and it's all good. For men, it's on the first level, so one level down. Again, codes, use them like that.
There's also a printout in that one and a printout up there as well.
Yeah, we have printouts.
Before, like, it just took us a few months, half a year.
Oh yeah, it's fine. We're slowly but surely like getting our act together, but we do have printouts, or otherwise it's just easy just to have it on your phone to not like dragging around some bit of paper.
And I'm pretty sure the men's toilets are open to be tradies on level 1 and they just don't care about this stuff. So just kind of bucket, keep the door open, and
TMI. Right, has everyone got that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we're going straight to SEO news. I'm just skipping through this because I'm going to be running this whole one. So we had a really, really, really busy month last month. I do apologize. There was a lot of slides about the news, but I've gone to the extra effort to also use DALL-E 2 to make custom images for most of these.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you very much, AI. So local search, there's been a lot of really, really big things. There was a bug that, well, everyone's like, oh, well, there was like a local search update. Like I'm seeing all these upticks. Sorry, that was a bug. I think that happened on the 16th and it took all the way to the 20th of September to get rectified. But otherwise, let's just talk about the things that actually happened. There were 7 search updates just for local search. So number 1, search for restaurants by dish. Now I love this because I love a good pad thai. I've got a lot of opinions about Thai food specifically, having just come back from Thailand and just kind of really missing that as well. Half Japanese, so always missing like like some really, really good Ashaki tofu as well. I just said that wrong and I know that, but I'm just going to move on from there. But if you want to search for that, then you can be able to put that in Google Maps and be able to look for all the different results. Now, I did test this myself because I wanted to like see if there was any nuances and things like that, particularly around maybe like near me searches or just broad map searches. Things was interesting. Obviously, near me searches, all the top results were by proximity. All the ones that I just were doing like just by dish. I think I looked for burrito. This was really bad to do before lunch, by the way. But yeah, everything was like organized by like the keyword and the business name. So like there was a business name that actually had burrito in the word. It was really poorly ranked. There wasn't a lot of traffic to that. It was kind of like not the best site, not the most optimized site. But I kind of feel like every time I tested like different things for burrito, this one was the front and center. So I was like, oh, okay, well, this is like the exact match in the name. And I know you tweeted about this recently.
Yeah, well, keyword stuffing's back. It never left.
But yeah, that was interesting. Then the review, then the menu listing. And the thing that I liked about that was like all the reviews were pulling out. And you can be able to, if you can see that, you can have like sentiment around these reviews. So they'll pull out like the primary sentiment. So most of them were pretty positive. There was one that was like, this is the worst burrito I've ever had in my life. Stay away. That actually was pulling out as like their dominant thing. So again, there was actually an update specifically around negative reviews. I don't know if I included that, but Google actually also added some extra detail. Don't get rid of them, don't delete them. They want them to be as one-to-one with the user experience. So if you got negative reviews, be professional, be nice, respond to them, show a shred of care that something negative has happened, whether you think it's fair or not, and just show that like you're going to try and like rectify a situation, even if it's literally insane. And there's really fun results when you just be like insane Google reviews. Discover restaurant specialities. Now this is a fun one. Again, I think this one is global. I didn't see anything about this, but I didn't find it. I couldn't find it anywhere. Definitely not in Australia, so I don't know.
What did Barry say?
Oh, I don't know. Well, like it was just like, oh, these exist. I don't know.
It's been like that since like 6 months.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, like all of these are just from like, if everyone wants to know, it's like from the Google blog. So these are the things that have come out, and I'm just like, oh, interesting, very cool. So how this is actually generated is Google is using their machine learning to be able to analyze a lot of things from images, a lot of rich results and things like that, which I think is really interesting because a lot of the local search results, a lot of the things that they're saying about that is it's actually using Google Mum. Who here has heard of Google Mum? Good. I love an informed audience.
What does it stand for?
Multimodal unified models.
There we go. That's like
But essentially, Google Mum is Google's answer to figuring out how to understand images, video, like rich media across the web, and like what does that tell us about what users want? Because they know like, oh, okay, like we've gone on such a long way from just looking at text and things like that, and maybe a couple of images, like, yeah, like add alt text, great for accessibility. But there's so much more about how users search. And the whole idea of where Google is going is that they want to be more personalized. They want it to be like your answer engine in the pocket. So the better that they can be able to look at all, not just text and things like that from HTML, great, but from all versions of things, is going to give them a much richer experience, which is probably why we're seeing all kinds of weird results at the moment while they're testing that. But very interesting, because they're using images, they're using reviews to find a place distinctive. What I could see was like, it's literally pulling out like people say, like walking into a friend's living room with just way better food and lighting. Like that's kind of nice. It's like almost like a vibe check.
Get better friends.
Well, if you don't have good friends, then you can find some place that's quite nice and friendly. And if you're looking for a specific thing that's quiet, I know like whenever I go to cafes, I don't want to go to the place that's bustling. I want to go to a place with Wi-Fi that's quiet, that isn't going to charge me exorbitant prices just for like basics. See updated digital menus at your fingertips. Oh, there we go. Multitasking to find models.
Yeah.
I actually bolded this out because like this is again like taken straight from this blog. But again, like we're seeing like information provided by people from merchants, from websites, open standards for data sharing. So what I find is really interesting from this, and who else here is a local guide?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. 3.
Like,
To be fair, I'm a terrible Melbourne-based local guide, but if I go anywhere, I'm just like, oh, more reasons to go and try this place, because I'm just going to local guide my way around this country.
the thing is great, 5 stars. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. It's insane. I've got like, one of my reviews has got like over 100,000 views on my photos, just because I thought it was really, really good food, and I wrote a very long review about it. Irrespective of that, the thing about this is like not everywhere, and particularly if you go to like a country like, I don't know, Thailand, where I just got back from, they won't have menus everywhere. They won't have these things. So they're using photos from people who go and eat there. Like, oh, this is great. This is delicious. Oh, what can I understand about this photo? Maybe they'll add some extra information about that. Not everyone does, but if they do, that's going to be the top ranking result. Irrespective, they'll have like these photos, and it creates this almost this dynamic way of having this interactive menu at your fingertips. So it will pull things out from reviews as well and say like, oh, this place is known for really, really good bao. Yeah. Look at all the photos, look at all the reviews, look at all the things. Like we've actually highlighted this, and it has like this little answer engine that's like populating all the like most frequently things. It's almost like an engram, but in Google Maps. So cool. 4. There are 7, so thank you. There was so much that happened for local search. Google Maps. Well, I was talking about this vibe check before. Like, Google's literally like, yeah, vibe check. That's not just for the Gen Zers. Like, we're also going to have our own little vibe check as well. So with this one, I've got like Fitzroy North. Oh, I'm so glad I spelled that correctly. But Fitzroy North, like, what's good about that place? Like, before you go somewhere, before you see an attraction, before you go to a new country, Google Maps wants it, again, personalized, answer engine in your pocket, wants to say like, oh, you really want to go to Koh Samui and you've never been before? Well, what's good about that? You know, take yourself out of your locality. Think about you as a traveler. Think about you as, you know, this person exploring a new place. I had the best time just exploring on Google Maps about things about all this place, all the places. And again, it's using AI, local knowledge, from about 20 million contributions from users every single day about photos, reviews, videos, images, like all kinds of other rich media and information that it can be able to garner about that place. So it'll be like, oh, people who love to go to Fitzroy North, it's not the place with clubs, but it's a place with really good cafes. Awesome. Oh, and the park, Edinburgh Gardens. Come on, guys. So that's going to be even more so happening. Aerial views. Now, this is actually like a continuation of the immersive view that I released in May of 2022, and it's just going to get even more. So you guys might, is this, oh no, this isn't the one. No, it's the next one. But again, it's using this understanding of like, oh, okay, people want to see more information. Like, we've gotten people to add like on Google Street View those nice 360 videos and things like that. Yeah, we've got a really low user-generated response from that. So we're just going to do it ourselves, DIY.
So this is basically Google just like getting their army to like, hell, let's do the Eiffel Tower, Empire State Building, that kind of stuff.
Well, at the moment, I don't know why they use the Eiffel Tower and like some place in Rome. Because they're only doing this in LA, London, New York, San Fran, Tokyo.
I think that's Athens.
Yeah.
That's Athens. What else?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Europe is a mystery to me. I've been to 4 places.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Do people use it though? Like, do they want to use it? Like the immersive view?
well, look, there's the aspirational and then there's a reality, right? So, you know, Google Plus.
Google
Like-
Stadia.
Everyone remembers Google Plus. Like, Google Plus was like the thing that they tried to bring out with all the local results and whatnot. This isn't actually a real thing. Stop smiling and being so happy about this. This isn't a real thing. Okay, sorry. For everyone else in the room and also you two people, we've got some members of the crowd coercing other members to do some things. So, not illegal. So I think this is just a continuation of this immersive view, and we're going to get a little bit more. Very interesting. We'll see what happens with that again. Google Plus, they tried to make Google Plus happen. It didn't. They had to depreciate it. A breakthrough for live view. Oh, this one's actually really, really cool. All right, so has anyone used live view on your phone to find stuff?
It's not great.
Yeah, it's augmented reality. It's not great, but for some like built up areas, it's actually pretty useful. I've used it in the city when I've been trying to like find somewhere and I'm walking and I just don't get it. Like, oh, it says that it's here, but it's not here. It's not the best, but it's still great because like I love Pokemon Go for a red hot minute, and it reminds me of that. You know, augmented reality. How cool! So you can be able to look at it. And when it's like, you know, you'll just say, oh, turn left here, and it'll actually show the actual building, it'll actually show the street, and then have like left and right arrows as you're walking through the real world.
Why are those cities so special, Nick? London, Los Angeles, New York.
Maybe that's just where the developers are like, oh yes, well we need to test here. It's either where I live or where I want to go.
I think a product manager at Google just want to go and
I want to go to Tokyo. Well, actually, Tokyo would be really fun, like so awesome because it's not enriched for like English speakers. So maybe that'd be cool. But nonetheless, that is really, really cool. And I would really like to see this happening more. Maybe if they ever bring back Google Glass, then instead of your phone, you could just, again, I just want to gamify my whole life, and I'm looking forward to it. All right, number 7, the last local update. Hey, Crystal. Eco-friendly routing on Google Maps. Now, this is really cool because I think everyone here that has a car, that's ever need to go anywhere or need to do rideshare with a friends, gas prices are really, I don't know why I'm saying gas like an American, but petrol prices are really expensive. They're really, really expensive. So Google is aware of this, and it's worked with like the EU, it's worked with the US Renewable Energy Laboratory thing to actually, yeah, thank you, NREL. To actually like use all of their studies and all this rich information to enrich their experience to say like, oh, okay, let's have the most fuel efficient route. It might not be the shortest, sometimes it might be, but maybe like that short route that's on that dirt road that will chew up all of your fuel because you're just going like, I don't know, something on this dirt road versus like maybe a highway that you're going like 100 kilometers per hour. Maybe that's more fuel efficient for you. They're actually using the statistical data to inform their models to get better results. How cool. So it kind of looks like this. And we of course, like we don't have like an environmental agency or something like that that's working with Google yet. So it's not available to us. But again, I know that a lot of you guys in here right now will be working with American sites, European sites. So it's one that's really good for you to know. I know I'm working with both of those, so this is relevant for me. You can actually choose what kind of engine that you have. Is it petrol? Is it an EV, electric vehicle? You can actually tailor it to the kind of car that you drive. Again, Google personalization, it's kind of getting weird, but it's so fascinating. And then look, they literally said save 26% of petrol by driving 9 more minutes. What? Okay. All right, we'll do the math on that one.
How much damage to the environment is 9 minutes though? Like, is it like negligible or like?
Well, us and Rel.
At Enroll.
Yeah. But so cool, right? All right, so that's local rankings.
Right.
Oh,
That's
shivers.
that's
Did
a lot.
I double up?
That's a lot of local. Is that the same thing or is it different?
I don't know. I can't remember. Anyway.
Pretend you never saw this.
I tried. Okay, actually, speaking of Barry Schwartz, I did say about this. So this one, actually, I saw his tweet and I was like, haha, that's very, very cool.
Yeah.
So-
No one responded. I was like,
well, it's interesting because they never listed it before, but if you're having to have like those inclusions, exclusions, whitelisting, and that's relevant to you, and you're not like including this, maybe that's why you're having some issues. Who knows? I just wanted to like put this out here that Google has added to their Google site verify user agents a new one, and this one specifically just looks to verify Search Console. It doesn't pay attention to very well to TXT. So
specifically, most of you will not be affected, and like there's a very unlikely scenario where you're blocking the website pre-GSC verification. So really unlikely for it to happen, but just in case you have aggressive whitelisting and stuff, I guess you just have to add another user agent to the list in combination with the IP addresses.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably the same. I'm going to assume it's the same addresses, but previously, prior to this, it was the same user agent as Google, basically. And now they've just given it a special user agent you can just ignore and not find useful. But another one is big news because they don't have them very often.
But I know that you and I have worked on a site with crazy exclusions.
Nick wants you just say you.
Sorry.
It's like you, the audience.
Nick and I have worked on a client that has like some crazy rules in their firewall and we're blocking valid bots. So
Crazy is the right term.
Insane.
Something that cool.
Oh, yeah. Very interesting. But again, it will happen and we want to share it with you guys because if you ever see it, it's like, oh man, I remember that from the back of my brain. Like I don't remember exactly what it is, but I remember that might be a thing. So good to know. oh man.
Boom.
I will for the saddest Google bot I could find, like sitting in the airport by itself. And this is what it generated for me, the AI. It looks pretty sad. But yeah, this has been depreciated, and that's man.
There's a lot of sick techniques you could have done with URL or path specific Google properties. So if you verify you're on the domain level, like say you have example.com, once you verify the domain level, you can basically verify any path with that same domain if you want. So you can do example.com/en, example.com/fr.
You subdirectories, right?
And you could have actually used those specific path properties in GSC and target a specific country. And that was a hack that Jackie Chu created in Uber, and I stole that for T2. And I wanted to do a clear mistake, and they took it away from us. Hot take, I actually think that GSC should be the tool to handle internationalization, not hreflang. I actually think it's more flexible with all the numerous scenarios. And every single time they take away tools, whether it's the URL parameter tool or international targeting tools from GSC or web, technically it's webmaster. It's basically webmaster tools that they just got rid of. It was still plugging along. I always think it's a mistake because I actually think they should make Search Console better and more capable as opposed to just
depreciating all these tools.
So, boo. Send all angry tweets to @John Mueller.
Who has
And Dennis Sullivan, why not?
But yeah, so I know that a lot of you guys will be working on international sites, whether now or in the future.
Were people using it, like in the room? Like, have you used the international in GSC? Yeah.
Yeah, we see some nods of the head.
Yeah, people,
So-
everyone's just shy. They don't want to get hand up.
R.I.P.
The camera's pointing this way.
Yeah, for the last 2 years, it was not working that well.
I've did it to T2. It worked great. Like I don't know. Like it's good for hreflang validation. It's kind of off because it's like it's an old tool. So it's kind of like the number of index URLs they show in the report is like not the accurate amount versus what you see in like say the in your index reports for each individual property, or even if you just look at the domain level. So the reporting was kind of dodgy, but I found the international targeting mechanism, the little checkbox there, actually worked pretty well because we had a massive problem with T2 where the US version of the URLs, because Googlebot's based in America, there's a weird like pop-up and somehow got confused and it overrode the canonicals, so which is always like, don't do that. You think you're smart and you're still a robot. But this tool actually fixed it up in less than a month. Like I think within 2 weeks we saw immediate impact with some top tier URLs, and within a month the whole thing was cleared up. And it was quite useful for me anyway. And now if you see that those rankings tanking, I'll open up Sitemaps probably after this meetup. We'll see that we probably know what.
And whenever I've seen that there's been issues, it's usually from my experience, like from internal links, or the developer just hasn't thought about how the structure of the site works. So they'll break the code from making like a new thing. I don't know, new set of URLs, new set of like framework for like how their new layout of how their pages want to be laid out. They haven't thought about like, oh, there's like actually rules that are influencing all these pages. So like we get all these kinds of errors that are happening further down the line that they just have no idea about.
And the biggest part about Google, like when they got rid of the URL parameters tool, their justification was only like a fraction of percent of people actually using it. And I think that's just bad on them. Like they haven't designed for people to surface that up very easily because it's not in an obvious place in Search Console. It's not something that's immediately clear. There's no, like they haven't optimized for people to use the tool basically.
Yeah,
So-
it's like in legacy tools and then underneath there.
Yeah, so like, I'm not sure, like, it's an incredibly useful tool and they just go by hits and that's just poor, it's poor UX testing, poor like
Yeah.
software design.
I'm going to move on because we've still got 2 more slides before we get to the main stuff. So algorithm updates.
Ooh.
Everyone's like, oh, well, there was like 3. There was actually 2.
They all blend together, it's all blurred.
Yeah, well, the third one was a bug. That's, yeah.
Still-
But irrespective of that, there were 2 really big core updates.
that photo of me in Twitter is really, really old.
But I knew you'd be up here with me, so I wanted to be like, yeah, follow Peter on, actually follow Peter, and if you want to follow me as well on Twitter.
Yeah, just randomly find Peters on Twitter, just follow him. You find him eventually.
All right. So again, yeah, there was a core update, September 12th, and it fully rolled out on the 26th or the 20th?
26. Yeah.
26th, thank you.
Basically second half of the month.
Thank you. Yes. So there was a really big update, and a lot of people saw, well, Gwen and Gabe tweeted out that there was some negative results from this. But I might actually take this forward to you because you saw some massive improvements. Whereas like for me, like I saw some really good improvements from brand and from non-brands, but just not in the same realm of percentage that you saw them.
Yeah, for our non-brand traffic, we literally like tripled or quadrupled our traffic. Like, well, actually, you know what? I take that back. We probably quadrupled it. Yeah. So like
That's
like,
crazy.
So with my rank tracker, I use Nozzle for rank tracking, and one of the reasons why I use Nozzle is that it's the best rank tracker, has unlimited competitors, and in the event of an algorithm update, it is the best insights. Like you guys can see like Lily Ray, you can see all the people talk about it publicly, but you get better insights with the keyword you're tracking for with using a rank tracker like that, because you have unlimited URLs, unlimited domains. As long as it sees it, it's available to you to query and like do analysis on. So my conclusion is quite simple. This is a site-wide update. Like entire websites do better or worse. We improved vastly over every single domain that was visible for all 400 or so keywords I'm tracking like on a regular basis across 22 different markets, and we crushed it. And we would jump from like 90 to first page for like parts of the website that have bad technical SEO, like there's problems that haven't been fixed yet. And we went from like Brazil randomly like first page for like soccer betting. It was like really like insane. So like it seems to be site wide. Like essentially even like the optimized page, unoptimized pages, it all helps out. The website that fell, I think it's very much an authority thing. I can't pinpoint like what makes a website stronger, but it is clearly like domains got stronger, not individual pages. That's the analysis I got in our very specific niche. And I had a good friendly chat with Nick before the meetup, and they say, "Yo, what did you see? Since you're still an agency and you have clients, I can't just look up JB or what do you
Yeah, I saw like a really nice like 30% uptake in branded keywords across my clients, and about like 20 to 23% uptake in non-branded, which is nice. And this is kind of like looking at like across like a lot of different industries. We're talking. No, I want to talk about the one that didn't do well, because I think that's really interesting, and this may be like a little bit different from what you were talking about, because this is a major brand, hugely authoritative. It is easily like it's usually the one that dominates a lot of the furniture keywords, it dominates a lot of the gardening keywords, it dominates it, like it's a big marketplace. So usually, hooray, they're doing really well. I've had to fight really, really hard with this client in the last few months to get things like just their sitemap like online, to help their internal links, to fix up all their breadcrumbs and their product schema stuff, like really, really basic SEO 101 stuff, right? In this slide deck, when I get to indexability, I'll actually show you what that looks like. That we saw a nice uptick just in pages that were now in the index. But across the board, for all their really, really big non-branded keywords, they saw anywhere from like 6 to like 25% drop, both, well, month on month and year on year, for a lot of their normal keywords, like for their non-branded keywords, like really, really big ones, with like anywhere from like 33,000 searches per month, to up to like 80,000 searches per month, which sucks. And when I was looking at them versus all the other ones, the only thing that I could kind of like figure out, like, well, I know this site in the ins and outs, and we've done better to get more pages in the index. But like looking at the page experience, looking at the things like, they've got all the things that I would sort of say like, yeah, like they've got the filters, they've got things that Google wants to represent, because I'm looking at their shopping tab, I'm looking at like their normal web results. Like they're kind of like answering all those like really nice variations around this topic that they want to surface with this stuff. They're doing well for that. The only common denominator, and I don't know if this is a thing, because I don't, but I'm just putting it out there, that like all their competitors that now rank 1 and 2, now they're 3, have local stores. Like how do you compete with that? I'm still like scratching my head. I don't know if it's a thing, But it's the only common denominator I could see. Like even just looking at their like link profiles, like looking at their social proof, like even like Google Trends, like for their brand, I'm just like, what is it about it?
Is the top line generics for this industry like quite localized? Like if you check like a ranking in Newcastle versus like Melbourne or like whatever, are the SERPs different or like what's it like in this particular niche?
Well, if I'm checking like
This might be
from
tough.
like I checked with Brisbane because like I've got team members in Brisbane. I've got me here in Melbourne. We saw like only a slight variance, but not something that like I would actually like point out. It's like, oh, that's the thing. That's the I still can't figure it out, and I'm still gonna have to nut it out, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yes, takeaways, don't overreact to algo updates, first of all. Just wait 2 weeks, see what it is, and then, take care. But like, hopefully if you did SEO well, you'll go up.
Yeah, I think they'll be rewarded in time because we've done a lot of good things, but like, it's kind of annoying for that one.
SEO is a test of faith. You
Yeah.
believe in the robot, believe in it believes in you.
Yeah. Believe in the robot, believe in you. I don't know, man. I don't know, man. All around me, okay. So this is now the 5th product reviews update that has come out.
Still not working. I see like there's a page in one of the keywords that we're tracking for that we know should be penalized by Google because it's like an irrelevant niche website that has a review of the best X, Y, and Z. So it's clearly should be penalized and it has been penalized by 5 product review updates. So I'm like, they're still dumb.
Well, product reviews updates, what do we know about them? You know, from 5 iterations of Google saying like, oh, we've done some more stuff in this. It's like, they want it to be user generated. They want it to be written as like, you are the expert. They want to reinforce like authenticity with evidence. Like I actually went to their thing and like wrote this myself as like a little shorthand because it was like hugely long. But like use the qualitative measurements. Like if you're given like manufacturing advice, make it unique, you know, make it interesting, give a point of difference, you know, like have something that's like, oh, this is really, really good for this, like pros and cons, but it's actually really not good for that.
Yeah.
You know, I could think of a ton of CMS reviews that would be really good for
And
that.
the content you have to use really inclusive, like when we tried out XY, because in one of the things I would say in my industry, I'm in the casino industry, I've worked in the biggest retailers like in Australia and all that kind of stuff. One thing I've noticed by tracking competition is that these people are better at SEO than like most companies. I would say I'm not going to like attack SEOs because I know like there's other factors why you can't get stuff out. So like they react fast to algo updates. Like within a product review update, within the first week, content changes on like all these like affiliate websites because they're very, very talented. They know what's going on. They look what's gone up and down. And one thing you change because I web archive a lot of these content. I just look and just say, oh, they've reworded these sentences to be inclusive. They included actual screenshot, or they made up some story that they physically tried this on a blah blah day or whatever, like the stuff that we don't like. So, like my advice is look at the casino industry, look what those dodgy people are doing, and then copy that.
Sorry. Is that the expertise at page level? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so is the expertise at page level, you mean every product review, or is like connected to one specific author, is connected to all the authors? How do you measure this?
So product reviews are specific to the URL and the product itself, and actually technically query level as well. So like a website can have a page that ranks really well on one particular query, one particular page, and one particular item. Doesn't necessarily mean that they'll rank well for every single one. There's some websites that will, in your industry, there'll likely be 1 or 2 websites that are quite dominant, but that's usually because they have the same style of writing, right? So there'll be 1 or 2 websites that do well. There'll be some websites that'll have a big hit keyword in like 1 or 2 particular products just because that particular review has qualities of it that does well. And sometimes it can be a bit random because you know how Google is. But that's what I've noticed with the wide array of affiliate. There's like, you know how you have like these SEO writing tools that give like scores and grades or like your keyword usage and stuff. Like one thing I've noticed working in this industry is that there's articles that have like 2,000 words and get 100% scores on ClearScope and all this kind of stuff, and they just they do nothing versus some of these other ones that do 800 words, less domain rating and all this kind of stuff, just because the reviews are clearly more personal. It's hard to describe. It's clearly the person got like insider access, played it first, and wrote the review of the game or something like that. So like I think Google's getting better at telling when something is SEO-y. as opposed to when something is truly authentic. It's still not there yet because I've seen some really bad garbage, but like it's getting better and better at identifying first-hand reviews of like a legitimate experience. And that's what I feel. But like each product review update has like there's been some back and forth between like the fourth one, the third one, the second one was big, and those kind of things. So yeah.
I always think about like what is evergreen advice? As fun as it is like looking at all those sites that are doing well now for some interesting hacky reasons. Whether or not these sites will do well tomorrow is kind of like, we don't really know. What is good, what is longevity, what has longevity is kind of like going the harder route, the longer pathway, the one we know is going to get the best one-to-one result when we really worked hard for it. So like one of the things that I'm doing like with one of my clients for a link outreach is working with all of these top athletes to do like reviews of like these shirts that have been custom made from them versus a lot of their competitors. I don't know how we got them to think that would be a good idea, but we got them to do that. And it's kind of funny, like this is actually way before this like fifth like update came around. It's just like we were thinking like, what can we do from a unique link outreach idea? Could we do this? Oh, well, they've got like all these ambassadors of all these great athletes. Maybe we could actually utilize this for an interesting idea and create like this moment. Again, think about what's not just good for now, think about what's going to be good for tomorrow.
I wasn't going to pose that, I said no, do it for now. He's like, yeah, you will dispute that?
Yeah.
I could do a hot take.
And that, guys, is SEO news. Before we go into the next one, though, can I just have like a little muttering from the crowd? Like, has any of you guys seen like positive and negative upticks from it, like either of the updates from the last month?
Moma, hands up in the back. Anything significant?
Yeah, pretty negative.
Negative?
Yeah.
So I've got an accent, so.
That's better. Put the subtitles on.
No, over the last few months, I've seen, so I run affiliate websites, and I've seen traffic, or keywords actually drop, like 80% of the keywords drop out of the top 100. Using the keyword tracker, actually just drop out of the top 100 completely, but all the URLs still being indexed. That dropping out for weeks at a time and then coming back. And that happening during the updates and even in between updates.
Nothing suspicious in Search Console or anything like that.
No penalties, no warnings. On two, I've got 3 websites and it's affected 2. And the last one was September the 26th, so it was the last day of the 2 updates. They both finished the core within the product review. Yeah. And exactly the same hour, one that was down went back up to normal, and the one that was abnormal just got obliterated again.
That's so fascinating.
I just want to know if you.
I've heard people on Twitter saying like these massive fluctuations were happening, or like when I checked mine, I was like, oh, I'm not seeing the same kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty common. It's happened to a lot of the Facebook groups. I'm seeing that people complaining about this, but no one knows what it is.
Was it this update the first time you saw it? Did you see anything?
Never seen it before. No one's seen it. It's the weirdest thing I've seen. And then after a few
So
years.
your traffic's online, but it's still down.
One site is almost back to normal, and the other site is smashed. Yeah. Just want to know if you. No one's. There's nothing online about how to fix it.
Yeah, I think it affected like more like affiliate sites in this case. Like I got one side that just got big spike up for the first like week and a half, and then it went back into the layer, but it's still growing. Another side is like slightly went down and then went back into the layer. So it feels like this Google is testing and then it's putting back the site where it was before, or kind of like promoting or putting down. That's my feel, but I don't have data to support it.
Those affiliate websites, do they have like Facebook pages, like do they have like properties around the web?
When I do the building, I just also share skills. So yeah, not all problems with that. Yeah, but between so everything, So
this is hard because like you don't know what the actual cause is. Like you see a winner in the newsletter, like you can't definitively say it. Like you can see some trends, but if you have 3 websites that have similar philosophy and 2 of them go down, one goes up, or something like that, then you're like, well, what's the deal? Hey, guess on.
Hey, so I have two cases, one that grew and one that was not penalized, but yeah, was hit very hard.
Ooh.
Yeah, like 30% increase in traffic on a site that has a DA of 90.
Yep.
It's a huge site,
Hmm.
couple of million pages. I would say like 5 million clicks per month,
Right.
roughly.
Is it a ranking thing or like a de-indexing thing?
No, it was a ranking thing.
Hmm.
So what we saw is what we are seeing, we are currently investigating this. What we're seeing is a change in the intent of this search from Google. Is because this is a very heavy.
Is it broad intent? Like it could be like multiple things. Some people might want to learn information that's about the thing, or they want to actually purchase something about it.
It is, yeah, it's related to a purchasing intent.
Mm.
So this site is very content heavy. It has courses and guides and tutorials and many things like that.
Mm.
So instead of just showing the content itself, the article, Google started favoring pages that have content, but also have the items that you can buy there.
So like an add to cart or like actual action on the page.
Yes, so it's like if you have a listicle where you describe the content and not describe the articles, and also you can buy in them.
Yeah.
Google started favoring those.
Yeah.
That's on one side. On the other side, the side that got a really nice update. It's just Google started. It's like we were favored in a way that Google was crawling more content of our site and started showing more of our content, realizing that the site has good content and started pick that up.
Yeah. So it's so hard to diagnose because the two websites are similar, right?
No.
No, completely different.
When we are offline, I can talk about
This sounds like a podcast. It sounds like a podcast episode.
Oh, we've been talking about it.
Well, that's
Subscribe.
really interesting because like that's like a change of intent. Oh, I don't need that.
Well, it wasn't a change in the intent of the user. It was a change of the intent of. Well, maybe there was a change in the intent of the user, but Google changed the way they are showing the results.
Is this just from web results, like image shopping, like across all tabs, or just web results?
I'm not sure.
It physically looks different. Like it's like visually, it's like, hey, there's a little extra widget here.
Not necessarily,
Mm.
but it was a change across the board.
Yeah, wow.
It sounds like a deep dive project for us. The Scooby Gang.
Yeah.
The scuba gang. Love it. Thanks so much, guys. All right. Thank you so much. All right. We're going to go to the panel. We're going to go to the panel. So we're going to invite to the stage Mr. Peter Mead. Woo-hoo. Please take a seat. Please take a seat. So, like I said at the very, very start, there was a lot to go through. Now, I'm pretty passionate about SEO fundamentals. Whenever I have moments where I'm like, oh, everyone just wants me to look at this fluctuation of this keyword, like, yes, super important, love that. But if you've got massive issues with the crawling, the rendering, the indexability of your site, well, there's no hope in hell that this is actually going to be able to rank for these queries. Like, I've got a massive client again that like they're like, oh yeah, like we wanna have like 10% increase in revenue by the end of this quarter. I'm like, I see. So
What was the increase in budget?
well, I'm not going to say numbers, but it's a lot. And 10% by the end of the quarter, which by the way ends with them like by end of November, is really, really soon, very, very scary. And they're doing all kinds of interesting things that is just really, really going to diminish the amount of pages that they will be able to have in the index for various different reasons of, I'm not going to say what I really think about it, but it's just they're not good ideas. And they're not really paying attention to some of the really fundamental things that we're trying to say. So, very important.
Yes.
Well, we're going to take it away with crawlability
Yeah, I'm first.
Peter Macinkovic. Woo!
Oh,
And here, here's some look at it.
this is cool. So which one's forward, which one's top one?
Yeah.
Alright, crawlability. Who here knows what crawlability is? It's show of hands, you have to explain it. Alright, excellent. You're very, very shy, everyone's very, very smart. So this is an overview of what crawlability is. So search engines send web crawlers or robots to basically crawl web pages. They're trying to find and amass things. They're like a virus that's spreading around trying to find every page that's ever existed in the universe for their own nefarious purposes. The web crawler's job is to find and read the contents of these pages. They need to understand what this page is, where it is, what's it doing. It understands it at different levels, at different types of things when it happens with the rendering and the indexing process, but it's just trying to find them. That's the crawling part of the initial phase. It's the I'm born, wow, let's find a URL to associate with me with. That's essentially what the web crawler is doing. So part of the O in SEO, the optimization part of SEO, is to make a robot's life as easy as possible and frictionless. Like, technical SEO, I always say, is to move the robot. Your job is to design the way the robot moves to a website, a series of websites, solve those kind of problems, and reduce that kind of friction. So the two outcomes that you have by doing this kind of technical SEO activity is to, one, surface up pages that we want crawlers to know about, to give a robot every opportunity to find the pages that we want, that we deserve, that they need to know about. And the second thing is to actually demote, hide, or even flat out block pages that we think will either create noise, confusion, or we just flat out don't want in their index. So they're basically it's a push and pull, right? Like, we want to give them these URLs, but don't look over here, I haven't cleaned up yet. Mum says you'll come by next week and I'll clean up the laundry, that kind of stuff, right? So the most fundamental part, the very first part of whether or not the crawlability actually happens is with HTTP status, and actually technically the HTTP header, that's a bit like full on, talk about that. But HTTP status codes is kind of like the stamps of an envelope, and your URL is kind of like the address part of an envelope. A robot won't open up a page. They won't even read the contents of an envelope unless it's okay. So if you fetch a page that's broken, like it says page not found, it's broken, and there's a 404 response, when you fetch it with Google like sees the response first. They have like what is called a HTTP response. It's a handshake. Your browser or your API is making a request to this particular URL. The server sent a response to say 4xxx not found, or 301 no, you said here, no, I'm taking you over here instead. And what happens is that they actually have this piece of like information on what to do before they actually look at the website, look at the HTML content. So I'll give an actual war story here. One of my clients in my previous job was Hair House. And for whatever reason on their particular blog, every single thing from /blog, whatever the article slug was, gave a response of 404. So they had all this content about like this, here's the top 6 like hot hair dryers and all this kind of stuff with styles and stuff. And like, whoa, what happened to this place? It's just completely gone. Some bug in NetSuite or whatever, but Google never can see the contents, because even though the content's physically there, the dev's like, well, why can't Google just read the content? You're basically telling them, this page doesn't exist. Don't you open that envelope, there's nothing in there. You have a stamp that says, send return to sender, or go home, or like, it's like scribbled, it's
She doesn't even go here.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't actually, Google won't open the envelope and look at the HTML when it sees that it's invalid. Like, you didn't pay for the stamp, go home. Like, that's essentially what happens. So the pages with that kind of problem, there's 4 different types. There's technically also 100x errors, but like those are things that don't really relate to us. They're completely comp sci stuff. The 2xx statuses are what means that a HTTP request is successful. So that means that the request that you went to a particular URL or request URI is good, and the bot will understand the page and add it to the rendering queue. So what happens, I'll talk about the rendering queue in the next slide, but that's basically, it's a good thing. Unless it's a bad thing, there's force. But essentially it's a good thing. Googlebot specifically will treat all 200 responses as a 200 OK response. It is, particular use cases for 204, and if you're a server-side nerd, you might say, well, if I got no results for a search result, it should be a 204, that kind of stuff. It doesn't actually matter in the eyes of Google, it's all the same as 200. 3xx is basically moved. If a URL existed at one place in time in one place, but it's now somewhere else, you're basically what we call a redirect. You're redirecting a user from somewhere. We like 301 and 308, they're permanent redirects. 302s and 307s are temporary, but why do it? Why not just go full on permanent? There are use cases for it, but just try not to do it. Why not?
Peter, 302s are everywhere.
302s are everywhere. Like, sometimes they're even technically correct by the devs, but this is SEO we're talking about. So yeah, 400 is the problem one. It basically says that the request URL is not found. So that if you just type in, you have to test if a website can produce a 400. So part of my auditing I don't do it anymore because I have one website to look at one platform basically. But if I go to a URL, I go url.com/something as the verb, and I type it in, I check the response code. There's websites, especially on what was the man where it became a master in, I can't remember. Whatever T2 was on, basically they couldn't have a 404. That is just as bad as having 404 pages, because at least 404 tells you that the page is broken, and you give Google information. If there's a blank page that's 200, that's actually really bad. That's what we call a false 404, and it creates noise, and that's something you have to declutter. And then you have 500 server error, which is basically your end, the website says it's screwed up. And Google will basically recheck that within 30 days to see if it's still a problem. Once it becomes a persistent problem, then it becomes treated similar to a 400 error. So those are the basics of it. These are the most critical part of crawlability, because without it, Google, the actual robot won't know where to go next.
Yeah, can I just add a comment?
Just the SEO friends in the room who work with PPC folk.
Just adding a comment for the SEO people that work with PPC folk. But be very careful of 3.0 or 3xx redirects. They can actually cause account suspensions from Google. When we send traffic to pages that then send somebody to another page, it's called a circumvention, and the account can get flagged, and that can be irreparable. So Google can ban that account and that user from owning another ad account.
And what if you do it on purpose, say you're in the crypto gambling?
Sorry, what was that one?
What if you do it on purpose, say you're in the crypto gambling industry? Why would you do that? They spin up accounts, they do paid ads till it gets banned, they spin up another account, they spin up domains, and it is a different animal, a different game.
Wild beast. You've got the budget, but some people are.
We're not doing it, we're the good boys.
If you do need to use 3xx redirect, just notify the PPC team, because they would really appreciate knowing what the new destination is, and they can update their destination URL, and they can save a whole bunch of malarkey with the Google support team who don't know what they're doing. That's it. Peace out.
Sounds like a you problem.
Nice. It's a me problem. Yeah.
Nick, one to you. Bring your beer and bring your good advice.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, to stick to SEO and get rid of all your paid search budget and put it into SEO. So next up is how robots crawl. So if you think of the HTTP response, kind of like a traffic light system or a stamp system, like where to go, where to turn left, etc., etc. This is the actual process of how a robot crawls. When the first part is when they check the URL and the Google bot will crawl the URL. The second part is when it adds it to the crawl queue. So what happens is that the Google bot will, once they get assumably a 200 response, so they land on a 200 response, they will look for every anchor text and every link in the head part of the portion, so your canonicals, your hrefs, what have you. And they essentially have a list. If there's 100 URLs on the page with the main menu and the footer and like the call to actions and stuff, they go, okay, I'm on homepage. I see 100 anchors. I see all this similar to what Screaming Frog does if you guys run it. They will actually add it to the list and say, these are my next things to crawl. They add it to their crawl queue. There's a huge crawl queue that they associate with the domain. So when they call the next page, they see the home page again. They go, well, I called that like at 4 o'clock. I'm going to call that again. And they add it to their list to basically work through. That's like their busy work. That's your client email list. Like you have to do this thing, you have to see your task, this is that. The robot has a task, and that is to crawl all these URLs and in different priorities. They have different mechanisms to solve that. So there's two different types of crawls. There's a discovery crawl and a refresh. A discovery crawl's job is to find any new pages or find pages for the first time. They're like basically first time you fire up Screaming Frog, let's audit this website, let's just run it, no filters, no exclusions, nothing like that. Let's run, let's chuck up the RAM, let's let it fly. And that's kind of great. During a life cycle of a website, you want to go from a ratio of like mostly discovery to mostly refresh. And refresh is basically to check a URL to see if it's changed from the last time Google's crawled it. Very fundamental things. Like they'll check it every once in a while. Pages that are more higher in the hierarchy, they'll check more often, like more authority, more links. But that's kind of how to do it. The amount of URLs robots will crawl in a day is finite. Technically, there's been a lot of talk about crawl budget. Does it exist? Does it not exist? It's kind of based on the amount of resources. So like the megabytes and gigabytes that Google downloads per day on your domain. And that's why when you have a cleaner and leaner websites, more pages get crawled more quickly and more often. So you'll usually find them more efficient. Doesn't mean that slow pages don't get crawled. If you're a big brand, lots of links, Google will make crawl budget for you. You're important enough for them to consider it in the index.
And I'll show you what that looks like when you get to my slides.
Ooh. Yeah. So that's kind of like the fundamental nature of it. Then it goes to the crawler and the processing. So that's the first 4 steps. The rendering and stuff we can talk about another time, and index is a different step. But that's fundamentally like that's how basically how Google talks about like how it prioritizes what to crawl, when to crawl, how often. They usually start from like the root domain, but there's other places where they can surface it up. So strategically, the way as SEOs we approach crawl budget is via information architecture design. So IA. So URLs are found on every page on the website, unless it's like a weird landing page with nothing, or just like a whatever file, like an image or something like that. But they're found on the website, and they're likely to be added in the crawl queue. Let's say queue crawl. I'm like, what? It's like backwards. It's like that. And there'll be more. So like URLs in the main menu, for example, they'll get crawled probably every day. Odds are. Like if they don't get crawled every day, like I've had clients who are so weak and so new, like no links, just started, random Magento website, where like even like main menu pages haven't been crawled in 2 months, but that's because they were weak websites. They're just in the sandbox, as we say. Your URL structure can also provide a hint on how pages are related. So what we have a concept from a strategic standpoint is a silo website structure. So you might have, classic JB Hi-Fi TVs, OLED TVs, and like what have you, and that kind of stuff, or like laptops, MacBooks, etc. So you have people like a URL structure that might do it. You don't need to do that. Like Google does everything on a URL by URL basis, but having a structure, even when like interlinking with each other, like this example of Screaming Frog, like this is like the core hierarchy of URLs, but then there's a page here where these URLs all link to this seed URL. It kind of provides a structure that these pages are more related to its parent, and the parent's related to the root, etc., etc. So they kind of feed upon each other and how they crawl.
Hands up here who uses a 4-directed crawl diagram and Screaming Frog. Yeah. It's dope. That's my only addition.
Yeah. So actionable points about in regards to designing the information architecture. Well, actually, I should add read the Polar Bear book. Just Google Polar Bear book IA. The most important book on the web if you're designing a website or web application from scratch. It's been around since 2000, maybe late 90s. It's
Google Polar Bear.
Polar Bear book. It's like the O'Reilly book of information architecture design. But it's referred to swimmingly in. I read it in uni, so like 2008, 2009, maybe like whatever I was studying it, and I read different iterations of it. It's one of the most fundamental books. Is just information architecture design as a concept. Similar to like how you would structure URLs. It's what you think of it. SEOs think of it naturally just because we're siloed and like all that, but you would actually get very useful concepts of how to design information architecture from the Polar Bear book. So yeah, it's called the Polar Bear book because O'Reilly has animals on their covers, and it's like an animal and it says the book of JavaScript, the book of whatever. It's information architecture design. It's a polar bear. So that's why it's called the Polar Bear book. All right, so actionable points. 1, avoid scenarios where infinite URLs can be crawled. There's numerous scenarios where there are infinite loops or never-ending escalations and enumerations on a website. So like infinite pagination or like query parameters that are randomly generated. One of those, it could be also broken relative URLs. So if you had a href equals monkey, then like you're on /house/monkey, then you have on the /monkey, it's /monkey, and again and again. That's actually very easy to do if you, like modern CMSs don't do it, but it was very common back in the day. So
Are you talking about like where you'll have like duplications of URL strings?
well, essentially what happens is in the href, you don't have a trailing slash. So the way a browser treats that is actually just added to the current URL or current domain as well.
Magento is notorious for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, any old CMS is notorious for that because most modern.
Drupal.
Hey, Drupal's great. I'm going to fight Drupal today. Drupal
I
7.
can show you some
Take
shit.
your Drupal thing to your customer.
Yeah. Drupal 7 is the best CMS that for SEO that's ever
But we're
existed.
not on Drupal 7 anymore.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
we'll take this offline.
Another thing is to hide resource hogging URLs. So anything that would cause an infinite loop, or anything like, for example, a filter with query strings that you don't really want Google to crawl. Instead of using anchor text, if it's an interactive thing such as like filters in a product listing page on an e-commerce website, try using form input that will trigger JavaScript instead. So JB Hi-Fi uses forms. They'll generate all these query strings, but Google will never see it because they're inputs. Like if you look at the HTML, it's input. They'll trigger JavaScript. Google can render it, but they won't physically click on it to trigger the thing. So they might see the button, but there's no anchor text, there's no href line. Those are completely clean and hidden. This is where you properly do filters. No need to do robot text shenanigans and stuff. Like, that's how you do it. And also link contextual pages together. So content hub. So, there's numerous strategies to do this. Some of it is just YOLO hyperlink into text. That's kind of what I'm doing. We haven't developed that. But there's contextual menus. So for example, if you would slash, let's just go into the thing I have the greatest knowledge of, skincare. If you were in like a beauty brand / skincare, then all of a sudden you have cleansers, exfoliants, you have all these other stuff that's available to you. You can have that as a sub menu where that's a secondary navigation ahead of your top line navigation. The top line navigation might be skincare, makeup, fragrances, gifts, etc., typical thing. But then when you're in the skincare section, now you have a special menu, a special footer that actually have these things that are more related. These all provide signals that these pages are super hyper related, right? And like you got to just focus on that. So yeah, those are kind of the strategies to have like information architecture, both from reducing problems, surfacing up important things, as well as strategic as well.
Is this all in the book?
No, not the Polar Bear book. Polar Bear book's about designing websites, really. So sitemaps. So one of the things I said was to surface up URLs from scratch. So you can't just, you can just have your homepage there, like give Googlebot like, a knife and water and send it to the desert and let it find everything. You could totally do that. But one of the things you can do is actually give it a sitemap and say like, you know what, you might not find this URL in your journeys, but here it is. I trust you to like look at, here's the last time I updated it. Go forth in the grace of God and then find this page and find what else is connected to it. So a sitemap is really, really useful. It must be valid XML. It must resolve with a 200 response, and it has to also have a valid namespace. I don't know if you guys can see, but you see where it says URL set XMLNS equals sitemaps, etc. schema.
I can't even read that.
Yeah, this one has to be without HTTPS, http://. The reason why is because it's a namespace. It's not that. Even though the actual URL is HTTPS and it is secure, the way the namespace is set in the spec is the insecure URL. So if you do HTTPS in that XML file, it will be invalid. The sitemap will create an error in GSC. It's just
That's a pretty common error.
It's so common and it's so dumb. You have to explain to people why it's explain like it's a namespace thing. Like, sorry, it's just how it is. So what are the limitations of sitemaps? Sitemaps can be 50 megabytes or 50,000 URLs. Pick your poison. It's typically 50,000 URLs. It's very, very hard to get 50,000 megabytes. It's just really, really tricky. And you can have 50,000 sitemap files in a GSC property, I believe.
Which is 2.5 billion pages.
Now, I haven't read the spec, but can you add additional things to additional properties? Like if you had a separate
Mead and I literally looked at this today. It was like, okay, you go sitemap index file, you can have 50,000 sitemaps in that sitemap index, and within that sitemap, like those ones, you can have 50,000
But what about like
URLs.
subdomains and then like this and that, you can add a different sitemap and then you can like link to them.
Well, we're just thinking about the normal site. That's like 2.5
Yeah.
billion euros.
Well, this is like a map.
That's a lot.
This is like a millennial map prize to see what's the limit of
Yeah.
sitemaps.
You can also set up domain names and verify Google Search Console properties specifically for hosting XML sitemaps, which is the way of handling all that stuff.
Yeah, it's like, if you do host names or Cloudflare workers where you can do other stuff where you can have specific builds for sitemaps. There's a lot of ways you can do it. Like sitemaps are really, really powerful and very flexible. Like you can even solve, in theory, you can solve all your hreflang problems without hreflang on the website just with sitemaps, in theory. It's, some people have degrees of success. So recommendations in regards to strategic use of sitemaps are less than 10,000 URLs. Some people can talk about their experience with it, but apparently sitemaps with less than 10,000 URLs typically have like an 80% plus indexability rate. Whereas if you use sitemaps to the full hog, you might have a 50%. It might vary in regards to sitemap sizes. You can also sitemap index or whatever sitemap. I had another line, I must have deleted it because I think that was just too long. But you can also have URLs in other sitemaps. So if I had a perfumes, or if I had a brand sitemap and I had Chanel in it, and then I had a Chanel sitemap which also has Chanel in it, there's no rule that says URL can be in separate sitemaps. It's actually useful in some circumstances to create a fragrances sitemap and those kind of things as well. You have a question?
Yes.
Does the dog have a question or do you have a question?
So, you're talking about sitemaps within sitemaps and of course sitemaps.
Yeah, go dog, I heard you like sitemaps, yeah.
Yes, and of course, one thing that I'm also looking at as well is What happens if someone accidentally puts a sitemap from another website
Okay.
onto there?
So have you read this? If you read the spec of sitemaps, there's actually supposed to be rules of what you can and can't have on a sitemap. So I don't know if I included it in this slide. I went back into the forward, but essentially you're only supposed to have. This is something that I found out reading the spec. The sitemap URLs you have in the sitemap are supposed to reflect the document root that your sitemap is in. Google doesn't respect this. So if you're on, like for example, our sitemap's on sitemap, our website /sitemap/the sitemap.xml. Technically, according to the spec, the only URLs that are valid in the XML sitemap have to have /sitemap/ whatever. That's so the root document where the sitemap file is located is supposed to reflect that. Google is very persistent with URLs in the sitemap. You can have subdomains with URLs in the sitemap. You can actually have external URLs and they will be read by the sitemap when you force index it. You'll tell by a URL that has never been seen before gets crawled, but you will not notice in GSC because GSC will only show URLs in your own property. So you're not supposed to according to the spec, but Google totally does.
Spec only handles children.
Spec is for children according to Google.
All right, we're just running a little on time, so we're gonna need to.
Yeah, I think I'm almost done. I think
Yeah.
that takes the last one.
Yeah.
And then Peter Mead's gonna talk.
Yeah.
And the last, one of the last ones you have to control crawlability of the website is the robots.txt. Robots.txt is the Bible, the rules of how a robot can crawl your website. And robots.txt can give explicit control what can and cannot be crawled. So you can put URLs, you can have directives such as disallow and allow, and say these URLs, these patterned URLs can call it. Asterisk acts as wildcards. You can do some interesting patterns with URLs types, etc. And the dollar sign is the end of a string. So in this scenario, I showed registration / something is blocked, and registration is allowed because allow supersedes disallow. So if you have a disallow that disallows all, but then allow says one specific URL, the allow will supersede that. There's a lot of interesting robots.txt URL. If you want to look at crazy ones, look at Harehouse's robots.txt. That's a monstrosity. T2 has an interesting one as well, as they do a bit of it. But I try to avoid and get natural robots.txt, allow everything as much as possible, unless there's an emergency scenario. I have no other choice.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Peter Macinkovic, everyone. Also, I know that there's going to be some really, really great questions to this. Feel free to interrupt and ask away, but also I do recommend to find us after this as well. Take it away, Peter Mead. Rendering.
Right, this is the next little piece in the story. Once all that crawling's been done, it needs to be rendered. And it's kind of really only an issue if you're doing JavaScript websites. For your HTML websites, Google does that step that Peter was showing about crawling, and it figures out, it sort of downloads the HTML and it avoids all the problems of rendering. So it's much faster and quicker. Here we have the same diagram Peter was showing you. Can you see the laser doesn't? Oh. I like lasers. Anyway, so
I'm just happy to have one. It's the first month I've had one.
yeah, so okay, so normally, well, when I say normally, that's not even the right thing, but Peter was describing the bit where you have the crawl queue, the crawler, the processing, yeah, and then Googlebot discovers that there's JavaScript, and then has to go off into a render queue, and so this is why I'm saying it's about crawling, rendering, and indexing, and of course, the first thing to probably take notice here is that this little departure going down into here, into the render queue, is actually a whole bunch of extra stuff that Google now has to do, and it is costly. It doesn't happen for free.
Yeah, Google does not have an infinite crawl. We'd love to have that.
And so it's processing power, which is very expensive on large scales. So let's go right into all the details of what actually happens. So crawling, Peter's explained a lot of this. I'll give a slightly different perspective. But since malware first indexing, of course, we know it's going to be Googlebot smartphone crawler. The crawler sends GET requests to the server. The server responds with the headers, the file contents, and these are saved for processing. So, and of course, I'll ask for a show of hands for some audience participation here. So, how many people have seen where the Googlebot crawler comes from in Mountain View, California? Well, you ever see those pictures of people standing in front of the Google sign saying, "I'm at Google," well, they're in Mountain View. Basically, the reason why this is important is because if you've got code in your site which does some geo-IP manipulation and changes the content based on the IP address, based on the geolocation, you're going to have trouble. So rendering's not going to really be accessible to Googlebot.
Which is why you don't have redirects based on geolocation. Like no IP-based redirects. You see that, it's like immediately, it's like, no.
Yeah, so Google crawls all these, stores them all, stores all the resources that it's going to need to build a page. So it's all the HTML, all the JavaScript files, CSS, APIs, memes, and things like that. So then it begins to build the crawl queue. And this is something Peter touched on as well about crawl budget, is that it builds the crawl queue based on what it's discovered with its own specific crawl budget emerging. So it's calculating all the things that it's encountering and discovering and all the things it's putting into the queue, and it's calculating what the crawl budget's going to be. So good news for if you're trying to fix up your crawl budget. So yeah, just make your sites really lean and get rid of all those extra resources you don't need. And yeah, so
I just want to add here that every single person in this entire room has this problem. Every single one, within with some degree or whatever, because what is most prevalent in web development today, which is to build new things like we're going to use like this JavaScript framework, like this will be good. I've seen React absolutely everywhere. Not to say React is bad, but it doesn't necessarily have JavaScript by default is client-side rendered. And so we have to do some extra things to ensure that it can be able to be side rendered, because otherwise Google will not be able to crawl through it and be able to see it. And every single person in this room has an issue with that. Unless you're super small and you're spilling everything on HTML and maybe a bit of CSS, whatever. But I guarantee everyone else has got this problem. This is why it's really important.
yeah, and that's right, Nick. And of course, the issue there is so your crawl budget does affect your rendering time, and yeah, as we said before, Google is selective. It's not necessarily going to just fully render everything and index everything. So then we go to the next step, which is the processing, preparing resources for rendering. And so Google finds and links to the pages and files it needs to build the pages. They're added to the crawl queue and cache. Prioritizing and scheduling is based on the crawl queue. Google looks for anchor tags with a href attribute. And so it's looking for CSS, JS, images, and links to pages. So it can build the page and provide relevant context. So if it's looking for resource files, links to JavaScript files, pages, they just may not get processed if they've been linked to via JavaScript, because the page hasn't been rendered yet, JavaScript hasn't been processed yet. So if the developer has built a page and included resources via JavaScript linking, you're going to have issues with your rendering. And here's another thing too, the most restrictive directives are chosen. So for example, no index overrides index, and index in HTML skips rendering. So the issues here is if there's some stuff that's been happening to no index pages or add in things like canonicals, things like that via JavaScript, that's going to be an issue as well because JavaScript hasn't been processed yet. So here we get to the actual rendering. So the web rendering service processes the pages that are in the render queue and renders the changes made to the document object model by JavaScript. So here's where it's starting to process the JavaScript. Of course, we know it's using the evergreen headless Chrome. And so as we said earlier on, rendering the web, it's massive. It's so Google needs shortcuts. So we're rendering all the resources that was cached during that stage. So that's important to remember as well. The things that were discovered and put into the cache, the render queue, that's what it's rendering. So some of the examples here is things like if you have files or resources that are reliant on a state change. So there might be a site-wide state variable, which is responsible for things like a time or based on a JavaScript timer. Then that may not render as expected. The other thing here is, which maybe you might have heard of, is this 5-second timeout. If Google can't render the page within 5 seconds, so it's been debunked, and it's kind of, Google has said, well, we'll take as long as we need to render your page, and that's probably true if it's a really important page, but I can't see it waiting around 30 seconds to render a page. So if you can get your page to render in a second or two, or you're doing well, but you need to have some, for testing purposes, you need to have some kind of a measurement. So we just kind of work on around about that 5 seconds timeout. So if you work on an average of, if you can get your pages to render in 5 seconds, then you're probably doing okay.
This is why we've got partial indexing that's just prevalent everywhere.
I do feel Google's getting better at it. Like every year they seem to get better at rendering JavaScript.
But not good enough.
They get better.
Never good enough.
As I said, you trust everybody.
Well, the better they get, the more intensive the resources become, because developers are finding more awesome ways to make pages better. So heading back to a little bit about what Peter touched on as well about the rendering, crawling, indexing, and rendering in 2 waves. Well, the first wave is pretty much where it crawls, discovers things, and it can index it straight away if it's not JavaScript. If it finds HTML pages and all the resources are there, and it can just crawl them, and that gets indexed straight away. Otherwise, you're bound for the second wave. And so this is interesting as well, which people may not realise, and that is, so I mean, what does actually Google want to see when it's rendered? And so what you're looking at on the page when you load up a JavaScript website in the browser, and what you see on the page is not necessarily what Googlebot is seeing. And there's a few reasons for that. One of them is that, as you can see here, with my laser that doesn't work, the tall one here is Googlebot. So here's what we're looking at on our mobile. Thanks for being my laser. So we would normally scroll down, but Google doesn't scroll down. It just expands the viewport. And so there's some measurements here, 12,140 pixels high on mobile. So the first little tricky thing that I can probably point out here is that, let's see these content panels here with images in them. If they've been lazy loaded, and let's say there's some HTML links that are in that content below the fold, well, Google's having a look at that, trying to render it. It can't see the images and it can't see the links because it's waiting for a viewport to scroll. Of course, Google doesn't scroll, it just expands the viewport. So for rendering, especially if you've got any kind of JavaScript framework, you want to make sure that you start your lazy loading after the end of the 12,140 pixels. Then start doing your lazy loading. Similar thing on desktop. But yes, if you're looking at, Alex. Oh.
There has a question. What about read more? What if read more is within JavaScript? So if JavaScript is disabled, read more doesn't work. Read more. Stop! I'm sorry. I have to ask for the people.
Can I answer this one, please?
Okay.
Please. So we
It should be called Don't Read More.
So yesterday, we literally put a blog on Deja Marketing's website where we outranked the White House for content that was captured by Read More. Because it doesn't work. Because Google thinks like, why on earth would all that really important content be important for anybody if we know that the user has to go through a click or be able to do something with that to be even able to see that content? So we were just like, oh, okay, we'll grab all that content, shove it on our homepage. Number one, the White House is number 3. Well, it wasn't even being considered, like, because it was just like, oh, okay, we'll grab like maybe like the first little bit of it, but then everything else is not really considered. And again, if you wanted to be able to test this, go, what are those ones again? These ones, exclamation marks. Exclamation mark, text, close the exclamation mark, plus site, your website. Is it there? Is it not? That's just done a good indication as to whether that's seen or not. Yeah. It's a good test just to even figure out whether the content is even being considered. Sorry.
You just search the content if you need, just Google it and see if it ranks. Because in theory, if your content's unique, if your content's unique, you should be in the first page or at least like number 1 for the content. So like if your content's underperforming, like a sentence or 32 characters at most.
If you're from an authoritative site, sure. But if it's not, then it's just going to grab anything.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's specific enough to the website, to the White House, but it's still non-specific that without it would have no idea who it would be attributed to.
I've deduplicated, like I've stolen content and ranked my content.
We are recorded, by the way.
Okay, enough.
Sorry, Peter, for hijacking that.
No, that's
but
okay,
just because we
we're,
did that test yesterday.
Some people are doing bad behavior. We've got another question, Alex.
It sort of comes back to what you're saying about rendering for a page and seeing the entire width of the actual load. But coming back to the point of what you're saying about creating lazy loading for after the pixel width, how would you communicate that to a web developer?
Where's the back button? Just go to that link there. That link on here.
Address.
And that's where that image came from. That whole article talks about that stuff.
Also, Alex, I'm pretty sure I've got documentation that I wrote about lazy loading for JavaScript on StudioHawk somewhere in the Google Drive. I used to work with him.
You can do stuff with intersection observer or whatever. It's like documentation.
Read up.
Cool.
We'll chat later.
Yeah.
Alright.
So, so there is an issue, I guess. You know, of course, not all JavaScript is bad, even though we have this trouble, and we know that straight away there is a cost involved. But there is some particularly sort of bad things that happen, I guess, and some of the issues that are very common is core content doesn't get rendered properly, hyperlinks and navigation don't get rendered, lazy loaded images, as we said, especially if you've got network performance, that can also be an issue. If you've got lazy loaded images and poorly performing pages, then that's going to be a problem. Page load times in general, so that is also a big deal. It's just a slow page and it just takes so long for the page to render. And document layouts very, very commonly just do not look the same because the bits of the CSS are missing or CSS files didn't get included. And due to the way the CSS has been included as a resource file. So anyway, just to dive into a little bit of it about some of the specifics, like we were saying here about Ahref. And yes, Google won't call this particular one. Can anybody see that? Is it big enough for, you can see where it says JavaScript void? And that's actually a tactic that I did on purpose on a website to stop Google crawling those links. Just to put an on-click function in there instead, because I didn't want Google to crawl these links that were in the footer. And but yes, so that's an example of a hyperlink. It is still a hyperlink, so it might trick you at first, but it won't get crawled. But it also won't crawl the next one, which is, you know, a JavaScript function, as Peter was mentioning earlier on about things like using form input, whatever functions, buttons, yeah, for your filters and things like that, which is a much better way of doing things if you don't want it crawled, rather than having to do things like no index, no follow, or read whatever, so putting things in the robots file. Don't worry about all that. Just set up some button click type of links for those kind of filters. But anyways, what it will crawl is a clean old href. And so this needs to be in the HTML if you want your pages to get crawled, otherwise they won't. So let's go. Martin Split. Martin Split is awesome. And he's done so much for everybody to help everyone understand this field. And, you know, there's a lot of ways to do rendering. But what does Google recommend? Pretty much Google says server-side rendering where possible. And that sounds a little bit like saying don't do JavaScript, but it's not actually. What it's saying is do your server-side rendering of the important bits. And there's lots of ways of doing that. And you can do things like pre-rendering or dynamic rendering to be able to achieve that kind of a thing. Of course, there's many flavors of that as well. But dynamic rendering is probably like a sort of an easier go-to, although it comes with its downsides. But what we're describing here with dynamic rendering is basically what happens is the browser or the user sees the version in the browser's normal, they don't know any different. But what ends up happening for Google, for the crawler, is that the server detects that the crawler is requesting a page, and then what it does is does like a pre-render of that page and then sends it to the crawler. So how do you identify or figure out if the pages are rendered or made in JavaScript? Well, one simple way is just go straight to your browser and turn off JavaScript. And if the page crashes or looks like a blank something or missing bits or it looks awful, you've got a clue there. As Nick was saying earlier on, go and do a Google search for specific on-page text or items that you think should be indexed in Google's index. There's a few other tools you can use to help you along the way. Mobile friendly test is a really good one to get started, and it's such an easy thing to use. Just drop it in and you can start looking at the page, or you can have a look at the screenshot. There's some clues when you see the screenshot. If the page looks kind of wrong, there's your first clue.
But it is different than the real rendering engine. Like if you run our website on the live test versus what's actually in the crawl info, it's actually different URLs. And yeah, it's really, really interesting because I find the live engine is less patient than the real WRS, the web service. So like you'll give up on, like, say you have 300 CSS files, we'll only look at 50 of them and say, type.
Well,
Like,
there's support for Google on that.
Yeah.
Because they are
We've got the conversation here
yeah.
about why the mobile friendly rendering engine is different.
Or even the live test.
So yeah, the mobile friendly test and the URL inspection tool, Search Console have the real rendering engine, but they are less patient because they want to do performance.
Yeah.
They support that. They score from Martin Split on that.
Yeah, because basically we have like over 350 assets, CSS files, JavaScript files, images, etc. And if you do a live test, only like 50 of that, and the rest is just like other. You know, the great useless response in the HTTP response they have. So it's not exactly the same as like a fully rendered page, but you can always find the real crawl info in Google Search Console once it's been indexed, and you can view the crawl page and find the real HTML.
Will the real HTML stand up?
Yeah, I mean, these are the tools we've got, and it's probably, it's not perfect, but when we're diagnosing things, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on, it's a pretty handy tool to have, and it gives us a near enough picture, really.
That also is really good. Find intrusive interstitial pop-ups as well.
And so of course, the very, very similar thing in the URL inspection tool in Google Search Console. And just one more, here we go. We'll go into how to do a little bit of using Screaming Frog. And so if you haven't done this before, bust open your Screaming Frog and go to the rendering section, go into the configuration tab.
And then we'll go into the rendering tab.
Yeah, go to the rendering tab and set these things up. I mean, as I said earlier on, you need to give it a timeout for testing purposes. So give it 5 seconds. If you know something else about your site, then you can give it a different amount of seconds.
Yeah, if you try to find things, then you have to like infinite, right?
Yeah. So and then set it up this way. What have I done? Yeah, JavaScript, enable screenshots because you want to see what it looks like when it's rendered.
So you go to, do you have the extraction tab?
Yes.
Yep.
I don't have it on my screenshot, I don't think.
Okay. Then you go to extraction tab, scroll all the way down to the bottom and click store HTML store. Oh yeah. Go to the extraction tab, scroll all the way to the bottom, click store rendered HTML and store whatever it says underneath it.
Make sure you have
Yeah,
enough space in your computer first. Yeah, just FYI.
Or just watch what happens.
That's always tips now anyway. And then yes, make sure you choose Google smartphone as well.
You'll also have to.
Oh yeah, I did have that. I had the crawl thing. So crawl external links, crawl images, all this sort of. Here's all your settings. Set it like this way, and then run a crawl, and then you can see a bunch of stuff about it. You can see what it looks like when it's rendered, what the page looks like, and you can see a whole bunch of other stuff, including you can see one of the things I find very helpful is once it's been crawled, you can see the rendered DOM versus the original DOM. And
original.
Not sure.
Difference.
Yeah, I mean, you can see there actually is quite a difference there. And so that will help you to, I mean, obviously you're going to be looking for things like hyperlinks, images, anything that should be there in the rendered DOM that's not there. And yeah, Alex.
Just to help everyone else out as well. So when you do the extract to render the JavaScript, also make sure to select the user agent on Screaming Frog to be the Google bot, not the Screaming Frog one. That way, it's not going to render or crawl through the Screaming Frog user agent and then try to mimic it as the Google bot.
Yeah, just that setting there, make sure it's Google bot smartphone. And there's some other tools, there's stacks of tools that can help you with all this stuff. But that's Screaming Frog, and there's a few others I showed you. And then there's a really good.
I got that on my slides too.
Yeah, there's
But it's really good.
Yeah, so that's a really good tool. Add that to Chrome, and just helps you pick things out on the fly without having to go through all the crawling and all that stuff. Just picks it out on the page. Yes, and so hopefully that's helped everyone understand about rendering. Obviously, there's a lot deeper we can go into that stuff, and I've actually gone a lot deeper with some people here where we've really spent a lot of time going deep into what it's all about. But that's all we can do in this short time. Oh no, there's another one. Jay's Celebrity Chapter. Add that one too.
Woo! Thank you so much, Peter Mead. Legends. Awesome. Okay, so I know that everyone's like, we've just gone through a marathon of amazing, great, actual advice. So I'm just going to go through and maybe just be a little bit top level with mine, but also kind of show you some cool stats and some cool ideas and things that we've done to be able to try and make some influential change within the short few months that I've been working on some of these projects. Okay, so indexability. So if you don't crawl something, if you can't render all of it, then you won't be, there's less likelihood that it's going to index, therefore you won't rank, and therefore you won't get any money. Oh no, that's the whole premise of this entire thing, which is why we wanted to go back and explain why it was so important, because even this is the stuff that a lot of people miss, because it's not as fun. It's not as interesting to go back and go and test legacy logic. It's not as sexy. Someone's calling me. Oh. It's not as interesting to go back and actually see this stuff. But at the same time, you could be missing some really, really big things, especially not doing SEO Collective.
Get it out.
So I've got some things here. Look, there's a nice little to-do list here. Make sure you can discover it, make sure you can crawl it, make sure you can process it. I think we've really, really covered this already. But again, don't. And these are some good ones because a little bit more specific. Don't disallow with a meta robots directive. Don't disallow with an X robot tag HTTP header directive. Don't make sure that it's inaccessible to robots with a disallow directive in your robots.txt. So with a disallow and all the path, crawl paths and things like that, and all the wildcards you might have in there. And make sure that the canonical tag is either self-referencing or you don't have one. Because if you have a canonical tag on a page, it's pointing somewhere else. You're basically saying, hey, this isn't the primary version of this page. Consider that another guy. That was a page that she told you not to worry about.
Question on that.
Yeah.
So for an e-com site where you've got product listing pages that are sitting across numerous categories, we kind of call them dual range categories, would you not use canonicals in that way? So for example, you've got a page which is pets that's sat within gifting, but you've got pets that's also sat within home, so that the user can actually see it through both behaviors or both journeys coming in from the home page or wherever, telling Google, okay, so this pet supplies page When we're going to rank it, we're going to rank the one with the gifting. But as a user, if I go through to home and go through to pets and I want to look at pet supplies, I can still do that because user journey data tells us that they get to that particular landing page through different journeys.
You've used Canonical for that. I think
Yeah, okay.
I think that list was like if you wanted a page in Google, don't do these
Yeah.
things. Like, so
Okay.
you're allowed to use
Yeah.
the X robots and the Canonical stuff. To be clear, that's a tool.
Yeah.
But like if you want something to be indexed, don't do the things that don't get indexed.
It could be a little bit confusing though if, because the question is, why is it there for the user, but you want people to do something different?
I was
And there's also the question of how exactly the same are those pages that you're doing the canonical to? Because you, in theory, for a canonical to work, it should be exactly the same. So then the question will be, why would you still want two of them? So you'd be better off to figure out a way of the structure just to have one.
No, but like the scenarios, like for example, you have like fragrance/men and men/fragrance, and you might have a men's section for the men, for people who buy gifts for men, for example. But that whole structure isn't for Google because you have a top line information architecture of the website, but you might have stuff that's for very specific intent. People like do gifts for her, gifts for him. Like this is the kind of the difference between a filter versus the difference between a category. Like a category is something that's structured, is the primary information architecture of the website. Whereas a filter is something that people would like try to get down and narrow down. So like there's very ways to quickly inverse it. You can rearrange like a category in all sorts of different ways, and there's obviously scenarios with that. So you might have to like hard code in ways that you will consolidate that. Like you might have like if you know every single one of these tags of the men, you just know, oh yeah, swap them around, just do a hard little monkey patch code thing like in Shopify or whatever. In Liquid and like, yeah, I know this whole entire category. I've done this like multiple times. So yeah, it's a scenario that comes up. So,
Yeah, and I think like the intent there is the key thing to take away, because at the same time, like a canonical tag is basically saying I'm not the primary version. There's like a similar to maybe like a duplicate page that should exist somewhere else that I wanted to point on the link equity to. It's a hint, not a directive. Like we're giving the Google like an option. It's like, yeah, these all exist. But if I've got all these other ones, and I kind of want you to look at this. We don't want it to have like a hard 3xx redirect to any of these pages because that would be weird. Because maybe like the layouts of these pages will be different. Maybe there's something about that page that is different, that is kind of unique, but not unique enough. So.
I have a very good example of it. So we've got categories that are evergreen, like pearl jewelry, for instance. We also have like edits that are purely from a brand perspective, pretty in pearl. And the collections are almost identical, like part of like 50 products or so. But I need both of them.
do they need to be in Google though? Is that like an EDM or something?
It's for like every channel. We use it across. It's one of our major
So why
brand
use a no index
categories.
for it?
I don't want to know index it. Okay, let's take this offline.
Do people search Lavisa the edit 2022 September best pearl earrings or whatever?
Not that specific, but there are some other categories.
I think we're going to get into some interesting things to extrapolate this when to kind of figure out like, okay, interesting problems, but is it really important in the grand scheme of things? Because like, this is kind of what it's all about. And I've got like a massive array of different tools and all kinds of other stuff that I use to kind of figure out what is going to help me there, which again, the view-ended source, it's up here, but it's a big mess of things, all kinds of really, really great tools. So I'm going to open up Search Console and I'm going to have a look at the Pages tab specifically. Now, we only really have a short amount of time because, again, it's getting late, and I really appreciate that you guys will be sitting here, being amazing, asking great questions, and also not falling asleep. So let's kind of like go through this. What is this whole thing? I've just kind of like lumped this here, and a lot of you will already know this. If a lot of you have forgotten about this, I'm going to kind of kick you up the butt a little bit and just be like, hey, open this stuff up, have a look and see what's in there. Because this is going to answer the question as to, is this problem a problem? Or is it something that's kind of like, it's a quirk? She's just like that. So again, I've opened this one up. I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's a lot. There's like 52 million URLs in some of these lists. Absolutely freaking huge.
How many are indexed? Like, what's the index to non-index ratio?
From memory, do I have?
Don't look it up now as you're streaming.
No, I know.
That's pretty big, Pete.
Let me
Yeah.
see.
800
No. This is a different one.
Different one.
This is a different one. I think I didn't want to put that in there because I was running out of time. For no other reason. But it's literally like billions of impressions, millions of clicks. I think there's something like 360 plus million URLs in the index, and like about, I want to say like 700 or 800 million URLs not in an index.
Right.
So I'm like,
Do they deserve
it's just me. Like, what am I gonna do about it? I'm just gonna start on the basics and start to work my way through the logic so I can kind of tackle this big mammoth beast and start to break it down into smaller chunks so I got a bit of an understanding about it. Because like this size, enterprise crawlers.
Yeah.
Only enterprise crawlers, again, using like maybe log files, which is really great because like that gets you like one-to-one with everything. You can be able to see exactly how things work in the most awesome way. Be able to figure out like, again, crawling, the ranking, the indexing, the ranking, the conversions. Cool. So I want to have a look at this. Okay, well, all right, so 404s, let's start there. It's the top of the list. There's like 11 million URLs in here. What is actually in here? I got product pages and event pages. Oh no! Oh no! I actually checked a lot of these, and Google only gives you like 1,000. So I have no idea for the rest of the 11 million point something.
Can I give a tip to how to get more than 1,000?
Sorry?
Can I give a tip on how to get more than 1,000? You can if you have verified at domain level, you can do like that.
Sorry.
So if you need more than 1,000, you can verify multiple properties with URL prefixes. So you can do example.com/A, example.com/B, or like some prefixes. So you can actually download multiple CSVs, and like there's been scenarios where I've downloaded combined like 50 GSC properties and downloaded the CSVs to actually find patterns and find the ratios as well. So like I do like common URL patterns like products, collections, etc.
And this is big.
There's a limit in Search Console how many properties you can have. It's like 500. Go to the limit.
Then you can remove.
Yeah, you can remove the properties, and also yes, and
Again, edge case SEO, you're hearing it first. You're hearing it here first.
yeah, and yeah. So I also tested it with multiple subfolders. You can go up to 10 subfolders, something like that, and it's fantastic.
But even understanding the ratio,
like if you have /product/collection, if that 11 million is just a big number. If it was like 80% like whatever like subfolder, you're like, oh, the problem is here. I need to look for it.
I kind of almost picked this site because I was like, this is like so many millions of URLs that we kind of need to just drill down by principle rather than tactic. But I love that we're still going through tactics. But the principles are like, okay, like with these software floors, I'm getting a bit of a flavor of these, product pages that are supposed to be live right now. Someone just posted this thing of like this pot plant that she wants to sell on this big marketplace. And she's probably wondering like, I just put on my pot plant, like why my ficus is selling? What? I'm like, this is why, it's not even indexed. Like that's a really big problem, not just from a user perspective, from a brand perspective. Oh, I put my product on blank, did nothing. Therefore, put my product on Facebook Marketplace or something else. Better interaction. Interesting. This is the problem that this particular brand has. So how do we think about this sort of stuff? Like product, event pages, like with a lot of these, I was like, okay, we need to drill it down to like, okay, 11 million URLs is a really big number. Maybe some of these, like we want to push to configure the server to actually give them like a solid 404 or a solid 410. Things that we can actually like say like from legacy CMS that they've actually expired, that they're actually not useful anymore. Do we really want these kicking around the index anymore? Are they doing anything for us? Nah, they're not. Future product and event pages expiring. Oh yeah, I also wanted to do like, okay, so we can't really do a lot about the old stuff because the scale's kind of too huge, and we're needing to like look at having like big overarching logics to fix our problems rather than small like inch by inch kind of stuff here now. So maybe for everything that comes after that, I want to have a meta unavailable tag after a certain date. So like you put the event live, you put the product live, you put something that is about to happen. Well, terms of service. Okay, you can put your ficus up online. I don't know why. I don't even know what a ficus is, but if you were to want to sell that ficus, you have about 30 days, unless you want to re-engage this post, or if you want to add some more money, or if you want to do something to kind of refresh this listing. If you really, really want this ficus to go, get it out of the living room. It's getting in the way. So we can have like these kinds of rules, and we can build in this kind of logic. So I was like, okay, we're starting to tackle this sort of stuff down. Again, what I'm wondering here is we're seeing actual products, seeing actual events in both the SOP 404 and the straight out 404 lists that should be indexed. That for whatever reason falls into these lines because issues like it's not populating the content, there's a bug that we need to fix, or it's straight out moves the content, we move subfolder, something happens to the URL string, something happens and it's not available here anymore. We kind of like wanted this to happen. Interesting. Second thing, okay, all right, well, we've gotten somewhere, not down 404s and so 500s. I don't know. With a site that big, server issues, we had some problems in the past affecting 53,000 URLs. Let's just put this and say like, this has existed, we need to kind of keep on top of it. But again, with server issues, if they don't get resolved after a certain time, things just fall out of the index. Because now I'm thinking like, all right, I know from what I've seen so far that we've got a problem about pages going into the index, and they have no idea because it's so massive. So maybe we need to have some better protocols. And do they know about this? Do they have some thoughts around this? Again, do they have those crazy firewalls that are trying to throttle the crap out of the site? I don't know. I'm just asking questions here. 404s. Okay, so this list seems to be pretty random.
Can I adjust one thing?
Yeah. Thanks, Peter.
This is pretty, it's an edge case, of course, but when you're working in sites this big, it's don't waste your time just trying to get the service error to zero, because you will always have a couple hundred.
And some of those are good things. I was going to say some of those are good things. Like if they know index, they could be intentional.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, don't my 2 cents here is don't get crazy with getting the server errors to zero, because that's never going to happen. And it's just getting to, if you have a billion pages or hundreds of millions, it just, you would always have a couple of hundred, 200, 300 server errors.
And I really, really love that. And that's a really important point to make. For this particular one, it was affecting the subdomain. So again, like this subdomain, it has like critical resources on here that needs to actually load the page. So I'm like, well, if it needs this stuff, then I kind of feel like that this is like a little bit more critical. But again, everything has like its place.
And also, to me, it's just thinking about the priorities. Servers, the 500 errors can be a problem, but how much of a problem? So maybe here in this case, trying to fix 11 million software faults is much bigger problem than if you even if you have a couple of 100,000 server errors, unless you actually know what's happening there.
Yeah, like a 403 error is like the most dangerous one on the list, where you could have like I had suffered that in April where the whole website was blocking Googlebot due to rate limiting and DDoS stuff. So like it's just like, oh hey, like all your pages are in de-indexed, like 80% of them like overnight.
Oh,
But if you're on top of it, you can mitigate. So that's why you have to keep an eye on. GSC is actually quite slow because that report is actually not up to date. Like that number, if you inspect the URL, is actually off by like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Sorry,
And
this is
forgeries, like they're forbidden
the last thing
errors.
I want to say. Sorry for hijacking.
No.
Yeah, so-
Again,
so-
this is important because like we're just sharing like
Yeah.
good ideas here.
Yeah, so that report, you would see that it's usually updated twice a week. So only trust every 5 days. That's my experience.
Don't trust GSC.
What? Yes, you have to trust you.
It lies to you.
We're getting some conflicting things. Trust the bot. The
Trust
bot
the
will
bot.
always win. But
GSC
don't
is not
trust,
the-
so it
GSC
pops
is not
off.
the bot,
How many
GSC
slides
is
you
the
got,
lie.
Oh, the podcast is gonna be crazy.
All right, I'm gonna try to go through this. Look, look again. This is kind of like going through the same kind of logic. You know, these are paginated pages. Like this is fine. But I'm not too worried about here. I'm just checking these redirects for any redirect chains. Again, the documentation has changed from 5 redirect chains. It's now changed to 10 redirect chains. Just going to add that in there now.
Up in the middle somehow. Like,
Yeah, but again, going back to like the crawl of crawled currently not indexed to discovered currently not indexed. We're wanting to make sure that like the discovered is going into the crawled currently not indexed, even like as a top level list. Again, this was really interesting because I saw location product pages. So like in this particular suburb, these are all the top products that are near you. Now they've spent so much money building out this whole interface, and most of the pages that I can see, most of that isn't even being considered. So what is happening here? So this is a discovery, and again, those product pages, they're existing here in the crawled, but not indexed. So crawled, Google's had a look at this, hasn't deemed it to be important enough, so it's just kind of like, eh. Secondly, discovered, so it knows it exists, but it's not even going to bother sending a crawler out there to go have a look at it. There's about 15,000 of those URLs. In the grand scheme of things, not huge. But again, they don't have a big blog. And most of the blog is all in here. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. Well, what's happening here? Oh, there's like a subdomain blog, and all the posts I can see from that is actually a duplicate of the blog that exists on the current website. Well, let's just consolidate. Why not? Again, location, product pages, they're all in here as well. But let's go to this part, because I think this is really important. The logic. Key things to ask yourself. Is there anything blocking crawls? I'm not going to even bother getting into that hot mess again. But do you have a sitemap? Are these pages actually included on that? I had a look at the sitemap and what was available. A lot of that had things like errors and things like that, but what was available in there, none of it had those location by product pages. None of it had the product pages. Because they're like, how on earth do we dynamically get all of this stuff and then add it into this dynamic thing and then do the thing with the thing? I don't know. Comes with dances. But it's a good question to start asking yourself, well, maybe we need to have like, some better protocols, or maybe I need to ask like how things are starting to, how the product map, the sitemap even gets generated. Is all departments, are they being able to build the sitemap in the same way? Because a lot of the time they don't. URL inspection tool, this guy. Maybe we can just kind of like this one is a really important category page or a subcategory page or something like that. Maybe there's something a little bit like it was just lost off that list. So I'm just going to manually put it in there and see if that does anything. You can verify this stuff. Internal links. We touched on this when we talked about site architecture, but internal links are so important. And I love Eamon John's answer for this. Shout out to Eamon John's. When we think about domain authority, we're not talking about sites, we're talking about pages, and how good those pages are able to link to all the other pages and actually distribute that link equity. Is it doing it in a way that is distributing it to those important pages? Is it doing it equally? Is it doing it something that makes sense from the way that you want to present that information? That's a really, really good one to ask. And again, Screaming Frog's really, really useful for doing that. Having a look at just like with the, on the right-hand side, you've got like the overall, and then you've got like the site architecture. You can actually see what is crawled, and then what is the depth of that crawl. What is the crawl, and then what is the depth? So you kind of get almost like this 3D view of how the site looks and how the site is functioning from an internal links perspective. And then you have structured data to kind of give context to the content that is on your site, as well as the structure of that site. Breadcrumbs are really, really great for that. Again, we'll get to this last bit. But again, if all of that's not really working, again, you might have a small site that is just kind of weak, it's pretty new, or it's just not really that effective. Well, we've got to either look at page quality, or we've got to look at maybe having something that is going to put some more eyeballs, put some more attention onto that. So we did this, I don't know, I'm on Twitter a lot, so I'll like, if I'm thinking like, like posting things to Twitter, I just know that sometimes like when you tweet out something or you put a social post out there and you're building some interest and some extra stuff, like some pages will be like, oh, okay, like, you know, I'll be indexed. I don't know the exact science behind it, but the social proof, it's kind of like the same way as like, once you post something, that's not where the conversation stops. For a lot of the time, it's like, you know, if you cut down a tree in a forest and no one hears or sees, did it even fall over? It's the same kind of concept of that. So having social proof is actually a really, really useful way of bolstering this stuff up. Are you proud of these pages? Do you want your audience to see them? Yes? Well, then make some noise, boy. Make some noise. If they're not important, then maybe configure the server to like provide a 404 or 410, or like redirect them somewhere else, put a no index on them, or maybe like canonicalize them somewhere else. Again, every page needs to have its own reason, its own unique reason for existing. And if it doesn't need to be in there? Is it helping you? Go back and have a look and see how the site is performing at large to figure out, is this a problem? Yes, no. That's a good place for you to start. So last one. I'm so sorry, guys, but this is the last slide, I promise. But this is a good reason for this. So here was I was talking about like the indexable to the non-indexable. This is from Screaming Frog, indexable, non-indexable. Lots of URLs. This is a crawl depth, yikes. You know, anything that's kind of like, 4+ is a little bit dicey. But nonetheless, this is just the way that this site works. We love her, but she needs some work. Good things that we did. So I joined the project before Thailand, so
August?
June, July. Anyway, months ago. And one of the first things I wanted to have a look at was all this stuff. Like, okay, you've got a bit of a problem of pages that are continually falling out of its index, and it's only getting more. If I were to do a trend line, it looks something like this. That's not great. Again, massive marketplace, loads and loads of different product categories of category pages that it wants to rank for. Again, they didn't do well from the last update, but kind of because like we're starting to like get somewhere here. But one of the things I really wanted to do was like, okay, you can't generate sitemaps, so goddamn, I'm just gonna manually do it for you because we need something.
Generate a Screaming Frog.
We'll get to after this
Okay.
podcast. Manually added sitemaps. Fix a lot of the breadcrumb and the product schema. Again, 101 stuff. 101 stuff. Added functionality for internal links. And we're starting to look through again at like the way that the metadata looked at from a page layout and making some changes just around the layout of how that looks. Oh, that's crazy. This is the 6th of September. The 7th of September that we saw a massive uptick.
So what was it before? Like it's 835 now, but what was the green before? Like 10,000?
I'll have to open up Search Console.
Maybe it was like 100.
Yes,
100?
more.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're dealing with the pages in the millions. And for this particular client, again, they've got really aggressive targets. They want 10% more by the end of this quarter, which is by end of November.
Oh, gee, it's October.
Yeah, I know. But look, like other things that they're doing that's kind of crazy is like they're wanting to index, I wrote faceted but paginated pages. My bad. I was meant to write paginated pages. I think I was just in such a flow to finish these. Why? Okay. When I already know that they've got an issue with that, do I want to therefore flood more and more pages for consideration that really don't answer anything unique?
So did you robots text it?
Sorry?
Did you use robots to text the block pagination?
Oh, I don't have access.
Leave with that.
Oh, come on, man. Everything is business case. Everything is business case. These are big boys. Slow dev turnarounds, like, again, business case. You've got to say, like, oh, this is what it's going to do. Yeah, please, okay. So all those things that we wanted, like, I can, when I really want something, I'll be persistent. Because, like, I'm just like, yeah, okay, you could work on all these new things. You know, we could look at, like, the layout. We could look at the UX. We could look at, like, maybe adding some FAQ stuff to the below fold if you really want. Sure. But what about all this stuff? What about actually getting your pages back into the index? So again, we finally got that in. Nice little reward. Oh, I don't want to say it's 100% because of this effort, because they've been really working hard. But I want to take some credit. So there you go.
What was the traffic impact of the massive gain of indexability?
I think it was like, no.
Just like spin the wheel.
From a clicks perspective on brand, it was 32% increase. From a non-branded perspective, it was 23% non-branded increase in clicks. And again, when we're looking at this in the millions, that's money.
Yeah.
So hooray! But you know, again, these still they've got category, subcategory products that are not in the index.
Super long tail.
So we're still not all the way there. But this is an example of all that stuff I was talking about, how it has real world impact. Thank you. Woo! All right, guys, that was an absolute mammoth one. I think all of us have earned ourselves a beverage. I'm going to let the music play. If you are watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for joining in with us. Please like, please subscribe, and hit the notification bell for all the latest updates, for everything that we're doing. Thank you so much. SEO Collective. Woo! Woo!